Hello, everybody. Good evening, and welcome to the premiere of GameSense, Episode 1 of Season 2. We're all here. We're all wicked excited to be bringing GameSense back for our second year, and we hope you're excited to come and watch us. So first, we'd like to thank some of the people that can make this happen. It's our sponsor, Symbotic. They've given us great sponsorship that has allowed us to improve what we do and bring a better experience for everybody here. So thank you guys so much for that. First, I'd like to introduce our hosts. First, there's myself. I'm Francis O'Rourke. We've got Ty Tremblay, Naveed Shaffa, Evan Morrison, and behind the scenes, we've got Stephanie Morrison as well. And our esteemed special guest tonight is Mike Corsetto from Team 1678. Mike, why don't you tell us a little about yourself?
Awesome. Yeah. My name's Mike. I am the lead technical mentor for 1678 and the field coach as well. This is going to be my 12th season in FRC. I was a student on 114, not 1114, but was a student for 4 years and started mentoring 1678 when I was in college. And I'm also a mechanical engineer at DMG Morisaki.
Awesome. Mike, thank you so much for coming and joining us this evening. We hope to have a great show with you. So first, I'd like to just tell everybody about our new format. If you look to the left of the screen, we've got a brand new sidebar, much different from this past year. We're hoping the show is going to be a little less regimented, give us a little bit more freedom to talk about things, and hopefully should be a better experience for everybody. Also, immediately after this show, we're going to have a 30-minute Q&A session with the people in the Twitch chat. So make sure you stick around for that. That part of the stream will not be going up onto YouTube. So if you're watching this after the fact, sorry, you don't get to see it. But stick around. We'll just chat, hang out, talk with Mike. You can ask us questions. Now, you may be wondering how you ask questions. Well, there's this little thing called the GameSense bot. If you look below the channel on Twitch, it's got information on how to send messages to the GameSense bot. You just hit the exclamation point and the letter Q, and then your question, and will automatically get sent to us, and we'll process it and put it on air. So, with that said, we at GameSense don't like to take ourselves all too seriously, and we hope that you guys don't either. We're here to have fun and show cool stuff. And if you don't agree with the things that we say, just prove us wrong. So tonight, we're going to be talking about where Recycle Rush is going, what to expect onto the field, how it compares to previous year's games, and what we've already seen from some teams before we head into week one. So to get us started, Mike, why don't you tell us about your initial impressions of Recycle Rush from a strategic standpoint?
Right. Well, first off, I think Recycle Rush has thrown everyone for a loop, especially our team. I mean, I'm in my 12th season. 1678 is in its 11th season, and we've never seen a game like this before. I know some of the old timers remember back in the day, and we're going to be hearing maybe a little bit about that later on. But from someone like myself who hasn't been around as long, this is a totally new experience. And I think we won't really know the ramifications of that experience until we get a chance to play week 2. So I think we're going to see a lot of different things go down that we may have not expected. Obviously, a lot of robot reveals have already challenged the way that we think about this year's game. But I think more than just the reveals, we're going to see the way that alliances pair together to win is going to challenge a lot of the ways that we think about this game. I think going into our build, we had a very strong direction. And then as we've seen more and more robot reveals, at least I'm starting to be like, oh, shoot, did we think about this game the right way? What's going to happen, you know? And I'm confident that my students will be able to adapt to what's going to develop. But I think a lot of teams are going to be just surprised at the way the alliance pairings play out, at the way just breaking out of the win-loss mentality in qualification matches is going to be really hard. I have a feeling maybe 10 to 20% of teams won't even realize that win-losses don't matter in qualifications until they get to their first event. That's about how many teams I think don't read the rules generally. And so I expect to be telling people at the first week of regionals, like, hey, it doesn't really matter if we beat them. We just need to get a lot of points, and here's how we're going to do it. So, I think a lot of the differences this year are going to be based around the way qualification happens and then the way eliminations are formatted. And then additionally, just because it can be very easy to just think about how your robot's going to operate on its one task, I think teams are going to be challenged in the way they have to think about how they have to work as an alliance. And I think that may be more critical than a lot of teams have given it credit for. So, I think there's a lot of unknowns this year. We'll just have to see how week one plays out, but I'm excited to talk a little bit about it tonight.
Oh, yeah. I have to, I can't stress enough how hard it is, even for me, to get out of the win-loss tie sort of paradigm. All through the season, everybody was thinking winning, but this game everybody wins, right? Or nobody wins. I don't know which one.
Probably nobody.
Yes.
There's only 2 losers at any given event. Well, one loser, right? One alliance.
That's true.
They lose 2 times, and that's it. Yeah, no, I definitely want to say something about that whole win-loss mentality, and there are some interesting parallels to last season with aerial assist, even though the game seems so totally different. And I know Mike has some experience with this. That the way that you have to think about this is in terms of total points, right? And your objective is to maximize your points every single match. And so, for one, as far as working with your alliance partners go, it's imperative to break them out of that win-loss mentality too, and start to formulate this. It is in your best interest for us as an alliance to form a strategy that will get us the most points every single match. And sometimes that's going to mean that robots aren't doing exactly what they want are designed to do. And that's always the case in games, but there's a different argument for why you tell them to do that. And it's not just it's in your best interest because you win the match. It's actually literally the points that we score because we're faster at it than you help you immensely in the seedings. And so I think it will take a little bit of feeling out for teams. And I feel like by the end of the season, that's going to be a lot easier to convince teams to kind of come together and put this alliance level strategy in place every single match, and hopefully put some egos aside. Although those always can get in the way. But Mike, I'm going to throw it back to you. I know that last year you guys at 1678 you had a target for assists that you were trying to hit by the end, right? I think it was about 1,000 or so, right? And I what are your thoughts there? Is that a similar thing this year, but now it's the primary objective is you've got a target that you want to hit, every single match as an average?
Right. Well, I think that's very interesting. I don't know if we thought that we were going to be the best assist robot last year or one of the best, but we ended up having some of the highest cumulative assist points in the game. And really, we just played what our strategy was. The way we thought we were going to get cycles the best, and it ended up being the way that we ranked the highest. I think we knew that assist points were going to be important for the rankings, and I don't think we realized how important they were going to be until we played our first event, and then our second event, and our third event, and we saw the way that our strategy of playing the midfield got us those assist points. This year, I think it's a little bit different because I think there are some assumptions that are made as far as what it takes to rank high. I know people are looking at the yellow totes and saying those are the key to ranking high. And they may be right, they may be right. But there are keys to ranking high and there are keys to winning a limbs. And those are actually different this year. Whereas last year, being a strong midfielder helped us out in the qualifications and it helped us out in the eliminations. This year, when you get to playoffs, you have to play a different game than what you played in the qualification matches. And so very interested to see how that plays out. But I can say that we're looking to eliminations. We're looking to take home Einstein this year, as lofty of a goal as that is. It's something to keep us going and keep us pushing. And so we have our eyes on eliminations, and that may mean sacrifices for our qualification score. I'm not sure how that's going to play out. Yeah.
Well, it's a good goal to have. Ty, I want to hear from you about, like, what do you think about how the game's going to change during eliminations?
I think like Mike said before, I think the cooperation stack is going to start throwing people for a loop. We're going to see, all of a sudden, we're going to see these teams that are trying to get as many objects from their starting zone into the auto zone as possible, and then going over and helping each other and holding hands over the step and making those yellow stacks in the middle. And then all of a sudden, it's going to be this all-out war where there's going to be one team that makes a stack of 3. There's going to be, in the perfect sense, there could be 2 teams, each getting 2 containers. There's going to be battles. It's going to go from, you realize that the other team, to put it simply, it's going to go from wishing that you had the best teams possible on the other side to wishing you had the worst teams possible on the other side.
Really?
Yeah,
That
because... right. Well, because at this point, you want the best teams possible in terms of cooperation, right?
Oh, I see what you mean.
If you want a team that can very quickly get you 3 or 1 or 2 cooperation on that stack, and then in eliminations, you don't care anything about cooperation, and you don't want them to get and grab those containers in the middle, and then you definitely don't want them to score more points than you. That's for sure.
True.
I'm starting to think week 1 might be a little bit painful because of that. And because a lot of teams are depending on that co-op stack for the bulk of their points, and the fact that maybe 10% of matches, at least at the event that we're going to be at, are going to have somebody on the other side that's capable of helping you do that, it's going to really mess with people's game. And between that and not necessarily being able to coordinate to get auto points, you have to get either all of the totes or all of those bins before you're really looking at getting numbers on the board. And because of that, I think early on, especially Friday, and even most, at least at the district event that we'll be at, I think it's going to be a struggle. And I think to prepare yourself best to do well week 1, the teams that are using their autonomous to prepare themselves for teleop are the ones that are going to be in much better shape. I mean, if you can snag a couple co-op totes so you're ready to go do that stack, or you can position yourself so you can get a stack started from the feeder station, I think that's going to really make a difference.
Yeah.
I think we're going to touch... Go ahead, Mike.
Oh, I was going to say, I think you're totally right for the early weeks. I think as we get to the later weeks and as we get to district championships and the championships, we're going to see that getting containers from the step are actually going to be the best way to prepare yourself for teleop in qualification matches, because your alliance is going to be throwing up 4 to 5 stacks in a typical qualification match. In the early weeks, I totally agree with you that setting yourself up for that co-op stack is going to be really critical to seeding high, because those are really low hanging fruit points. And actually, when I look at a lot of the robots out there, pretty much they're only built for the co-op stack. I'll go into that a little bit later, but I do see a lot of teams that have built in that capability for the co-op stack, and they may not be optimized for many other things besides that, actually. So I think we may see a strength in the co-op stack in the early weeks, but I think those teams are going to find that they need to broaden their abilities if they want to continue to rank high in the later weeks.
Yeah, one thing to consider is, while the co-op's worth a lot of points, it's worth a lot of points because it's probably going to take a lot of time. And as teams get better at stacking, it may actually be faster to just ignore it, leave, don't waste and try and wait for the other team to come over and push the tote over close enough to you so you can grab it and put it on your stack of 3. It might be faster to just go and start your stack and get a stack of 5 up by the time that they're done.
I mean, I see where you're going with that, Ty. I kind of disagree, just because it's worth so many points, even though it does take a lot of time. But now that we're kind of talking about points, let's talk a little bit about how the points are kind of structured in this game here. Why don't you take it off, Evan?
Cool. Thanks, Francis. I think, this game from a fundamental standpoint is very different from any of the games that we've seen in recent years because of the way that the point structure works. And and the resource limitations involved, which we'll get to a little bit later. But ultimately, your first line of scoring is totes, right? But those aren't really high value items, and putting totes in stacks by themselves isn't worth anything more than being a neat, nice stack, right? The totes themselves are each worth the same amount of points. You put a container on top, now you're starting to multiply the value of that entire stack. Those are the big point items. But the actions involved to do that big point item, first off, you have to have a stack of totes. Otherwise, the recycling container is not worth anything, right? So if you build a robot that specializes in just the recycling container, pick up and place on top of a stack, if you're in a match that doesn't have anybody that can stack totes, you're kind of out of luck, right? Like, you're just not going to score that many points. And maybe that's worth it for you because you're going to score tons of points in matches where you've got really good stackers, but they can't actually do anything other than just make the stacks. But again, those teams are also hurt by not being in matches that have teams which can put containers on top. So now if you're looking at controlling your own destiny and doing all this stuff, you're getting totes, you're stacking totes, and then you have to get containers, stack containers, and then you got to place the whole thing, right? Or maybe you're building each one a tote and a container at a time, but ultimately it's a lot of different mechanisms and a lot of different stuff, and it's really hard. They're very different challenges to tackle, and that's not even considering trying to get yourself more containers to play with. So I don't know if you guys have more thoughts, Francis.
Oh yeah, I think it'll be really interesting to see how teams break that down. I can see. I wonder. A lot of robots we've seen are able to do, at least from the videos we've seen, can stack and can do recycling containers. I wonder if alliances are going to be able to work together to effectively parallel those processes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think this is all going to come down to score optimization, and that's where I was saying that I think this is something that teams are going to start realizing, is it's not just about going out there and doing the thing that you've done 50 times on the practice field. You're going to have to be creative if you want to optimize your score, because the top teams aren't going to seed high because they alone are scoring 3 stacks a match. They're going to seed high because they're scoring 3 stacks a match, and they figured out how to get their alliance partners to put a stack up themselves in that match as well. And they figure out how to coordinate their other alliance partners to be like, hey, we can score this many points if we work together and utilize our resources. So it's not going to happen every match, and I think you're going to see the teams that specialized, they'll have a place in elimination alliances, and they'll have a place on certain qualification alliances. But they are going to be hampered, like you said, when their kind of ideal partners aren't on the field with them. And I think teams are going to realize that to really optimize their score, they're going to have to kind of create this elaborate dance of robots that can maneuver around the field and glide past the pool noodles that are on the carpet, or
the tethers.
Or the tethers, right?
That
or
dance
just drive
is not
right
going to
over
be
them
pretty.
and cut them up. You know what I mean? So I think teams are just going to have to realize that they got to coordinate really well if they want to optimize their score each match. And it was kind of the same thing last year. You had to organize your alliance well and put the right people in the right positions on the field if you wanted to give yourself your best chance at getting a lot of qualifying points in the win. So I think that's going to happen again a lot this year.
Yeah, and I think that some games, it's like, for example, like 2006 or 2005, very much it's like we have 3 good robots on the alliance. They each do their own thing, which is scoring the object, and they try to just get as many points as you can, and then that's how many points you score. Last year, there were a lot of role players, and on the surface, at least when I first saw this game, like during kickoff, I was like, this is another one of those games. Everybody's playing their own game. They're coming together. They're just sort of doing what they do, and at the end, we get up 3 times a certain number of points, right? But upon reflection, really, this game is also a game of role players, but not in the sense like it was last year, where you're so hard and fast. Like, I do this, you do this, you do this. It's like you all have to have a broad skill set. You know what I mean? Sort of like, honestly, sort of like what you see with a lot of kids that come out of first.
Yeah. I don't think you need a broad skill set, though. I disagree with that. I think there's going to be teams that establish themselves as having a position on the field, and they're going to find ways to allow their alliance partners to contribute to that position. When they put themselves in a fixed spot, they can allow their alliance partners to flex around that in order to get a high points value. I'm just gonna. I mean, I don't know how it's gonna play out, but we have a definite plan for each of our matches, and we have a role that we want to play, and we want to prove the points that we can bring to the table, and say, hey, if we're doing this, you can add on in this way, and then we're gonna get this cumulative points total. And I think when we talk about better teams maybe working with not as experienced teams on the field, I think that's going to be actually maybe a joyous point for teams that aren't as good, is they're going to go into this match and know that they're going to get a big boost in their ranking score because they're working with this top team. And how can I work with this top team to really optimize my score? More than maybe last year, where a 254th shows up on the field and they're like, hey, we got to take all 3 auto balls because we're going to drain them all in the hot goal, right? And then this rookie team is like, well, we were really hoping to test our auto, but I guess, and we'll get the win. This year, it's like, hey, we got to do this because we're going to get the most points. And it's not only going to give you a quote unquote win, it's better than a win because it's going to be more than, the average amount of qualification points people are throwing up at the regional. So you definitely want to work with us because it's going to give you a huge boost in your ranking. So I think teams are going to be excited to work with the higher level teams in alliances this year in qualification because it's going to really enhance their score. So teams are going to get excited seeing who's on the field with them more than previous years, I think.
All right,
Definitely.
I can see that.
Yeah.
I want to add on to that. In terms of going back to what Francis said about kind of on the surface, this looked like a you play your role, I play my role game. If it was a traditional win-loss game, I think that would absolutely be true because you can kind of define a baseline and say, if I'm able to just basically clear the field of the initial recycling containers myself and and put up a co-op stack or something of that ilk every single match, I'm pretty much going to win every single match, unless I'm up against a really good alliance. But the fact of the matter is that's not what actually seeds you high. Now you have to start extending past that and being like, I just need to get the most points. And so in that regard, you can't think about it in that way anymore because as you said, you have to optimize. And that may mean that you need to provide your alliance with more stuff than you initially start out with, which I think leads into our next topic.
Yeah, I was going to say, Evan, you seem to be very segueing right into our next sort of bullet point here. Talk to us about how, not just the limited number of pieces, but how they play with regard to everything in the center, perhaps.
Yeah, and there's a lot of totes on the field. I really doubt that any alliance, even all the way up through championships, is actually going to run out of all their available totes. Some of that's because it's really not worth to a lot of teams being able to flip the totes over that are upside down just because you've got so many that are right side up already. But specifically, right, the high value items are the recycling containers. It literally triples the value of any stack that it goes in. And if you put litter in the recycling container, then that's like it has an extra tote below it. That's just how the point structure works. And every alliance starts with 3 on their side. So I don't care if my robot can make 3 full stacks or the alliance that can make 3 full stacks. At the end of the day, I've only got those 3 recycling containers unless I can go to the center and get myself some more. So that's where you start to see these specialists and kind of the arms race that we're talking about the rush and recycle rush and getting to the center as quickly as possible and securing those resources. Because otherwise, it's not a linear scoring, right? You could say my robot will score all of the cans that I start with. Great. Okay. But that means that your alliance that's it.
Capped out.
Right?
Yeah.
You're capped out. And so another robot that can score 2, right? Let's say that most of their matches they get paired up with 2 other robots that can make 1 stack. They're just as good, right? Those robots are going to be just right up there with you in the rankings. So you have to find a way to differentiate them yourself. And that's where we start seeing some of the upper echelon teams, going for those center cans really quickly. But once again, that's one more separate mechanism that you have to put on your robot. And it just starts piling on and on and on about breaking through the next barrier. I don't know who else wants to chime in on this. That's kind of my shtick.
On resource limitation, especially at this level of the game early on in the weeks, I think there's going to be an issue with where people are getting their totes from. I expected to see more landfill bots. I thought we'd see a lot more of the high-end teams focusing on that because they could get them quicker, but I really see, especially early in the competition, teams wanting to get totes from the tote chute, and maybe all 3 robots want to do it. So that 3rd robot might need to figure out how it's going to fit into the equation.
Whoop, sorry about that. All right, so yeah, that's a good discussion here. Ty, did you want to say something about this topic before we sort of go on to how you're ranking?
No, I was just going to segue onto that.
Like me?
Yeah, I might
so.
even Dean Kamen onto what it takes to rank high.
Sounds weird. Like, go ahead.
So I think something important to consider here is, in order to rank high in previous years, you just had to win. You basically had to win the most matches. Unless it was 2012, then you had to balance the most bridges. But this year, however, it's this whoever scores the highest average of points, which I think is going to bring in consistency much more than people think. Last year you could have a bad game, but if the other team had a worse game, then you still won, and it was as if, you had a great game anyway. But now, no matter what the other alliance does, if you've got a bad game and you accidentally knock over a stack, then there it is. You either got to restack it up before the
GG.
Yeah, and your whole average is, your average is affected from that. So
Yep.
I think, there's always that team that doesn't quite have it all together, but then that one match that they do, all of a sudden they score like 100,000 points and it's incredible. And I think those teams are going to have a much harder time this year than those teams that consistently put up, for maybe this year 60 or 80 points. If you can put up 60 or 80 points every single match, you're going to be more reliable and even probably more desirable than a team that can, just, for lack of a better term, stumble upon 200 points.
I mean, every year we always say consistency is the most important. In fact, it's probably pretty consistent that we say consistency is important. But you bring up a good point that it's, equally consistent. It's consistently important here.
Yeah, but I think the luck factor is removed a lot this year. Whereas the luck factor, if you ask any team that has a lot of experience competing, luck plays a huge role in where you end up on the field. I mean, we lost one match at Sacramento because our alliance partner drove backwards in autonomous and got us like 70 points in penalties, right? I mean, that's totally unlucky.
It's going to be easy this year.
I may or may not have been cheering about that match.
Evan and I, we lucked into a world championship, so I'm just putting that there.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah.
I mean, luck has played a big factor, and this year with the way the rankings go, luck definitely plays a lesser factor. Yeah. We may see some rankings determined by how many times teams are with other competent teams and they're getting up like 4 or 5 stacks in a ranking match, but I think that's later down the road. For right now, the teams that come out and score consistently are going to be the ones that benefit the most. So driver practice this year is huge. Really pushing to work out the bugs in your machine is a really big emphasis this year, because I think and I tell my kids this all the time, don't believe the reveal videos at all. Nope. I mean, we showed how many 3-ball autonomouses last year. We never did it in a match, right? It built a lot of hype, but we never lived up to that. There's a lot of teams that are showing their highlight reels and reveal videos, and they get out on the field and maybe they'll make a stack, maybe to a match, because teams tend to ignore in their own mind the times where they fail in practice and they're not able to deliver out in the field. But like you said, consistency is going to be key. So evaluating what went wrong with your machine and really fixing that bug so it doesn't happen again, because you can't let it happen in any one of your 10 to 12 qualification matches. Yeah.
And to bring up another point about you're talking about, in many years, if you could drive, you could do something. You could just basically get in other team's way and do something. This year, if you can drive,
that's great.
There's a good argument to be made that you should be better off just staying in your pit and making your robot better for your next match.
Push noodles.
Or push noodles. You could push noodles. Yeah, woo, push noodles.
If you don't get stuck on them.
Yeah, if you don't get stuck on them. But just driving ain't gonna cut it this year. There's gonna be a lot of teams out there that maybe felt the rising tide that are definitely gonna get evened out. And I think that you can sort of like say that like, well, excuse me, I got a little sidetracked there. I remember last year when we had Frank on the show, or actually after that, we had an AMA session with all of us, and we were talking, and Frank was in the chat, and he mentioned sort of like, oh, how do you create a ranking system that's more fair? And we said, well, you could do this or do that or do this. This seems like a more way to make a more representative top 8 than any other year, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
So,
absolutely.
All right. Well, with that, we're gonna segue really quick into a video brought to us by our good friend Looking Forward himself. You all know him on him or her on Chief Delphi. This person brings predictions about the coming week's events and teams to look out for. And last year they gave us a video every week. This year, here comes video number 1.
For the second straight season, First threw a curveball at teams on kickoff. While Recycle Rush is certainly a change, it is also a throwback to old school FRC. A number of items are pulled out of First Antiquity, from various distinct scoring objects to a lack of bumpers, to score multipliers, and even tethers. While the late season will likely bring center field battles reminiscent of 2002 and 2003, with no defense and advancement based purely on scoring in 2015, strategically this game may end up more like the 2001 4v0 scoring race than any other. The best in 2001 were comprised of specialist robots, designated with completing specific tasks in each match. Without the time bonuses, it'll be interesting to see if the same holds true in 2015.
All right, so thank you. Looking forward to that little retrospective on what we've done in games from the past and how they've sort of related, or could be related to this year's game. So let's sort of touch on that a little bit. How do we compare this game to years past? We touched on it a little bit that it compares in some respect to 2014, or excuse me, 2014. Yeah, it's 2014. But really, the easiest comparison that anyone could make probably is this game to 2001. For those of you who aren't familiar, the 2001 game, it was 4v none. Everybody was competing just to try to get the highest score possible. And they did that by basically having various tasks they could complete on the field, and then they could also stop the robots early to get a multiplier. And there's also, as you sort of mentioned, 2003, the King of the Hill, and sort of 2002. I kind of like want to touch on this a little bit. I was around in 2003. The stacking of totes is the obvious, one of the also easiest ways to sort of look at this game. But if you didn't play 2003, you could probably, if you look back at the video, you could probably find exactly 0 instances of people stacking totes, because nobody stacked a tote that year. It was very much a defensive, bash 'em up, hit 'em up game.
More attack than stack.
Yes, yeah. More attack than stack, that's for sure. But I want to hear what you guys have to say. What do you think about, what lessons from old games can we draw for this year as we go into week 1 mostly blind?
I think the race against the clock in 2001 is going to take into a big factor here, because while strategy is always important in a first game, right? Which is kind of why we have this show. Its strategy is almost more important in a game where you don't have an opponent that you have to deal with. Last year, you could say, okay, drivetrain bot, just go and just bash as much as you can on 971 or 254 and try and slow them down as much as you can. This time, it's just like, okay, this is what we have to work with. We have very known quantity. How can we orchestrate this in the best possible way? And that's what 2001, that's what the winners of 2001 did, is they either had a robot that did everything perfectly, or they were able to work with their alliance partners in incredible ways.
Yeah.
There were a lot of role specialists that year that came through big in eliminations in that alliance stage where you could really build a cohesive alliance. The other interesting thing, and also compared to 2001, is with the 4v0 then, and with the no wins and losses, there's no such thing as an easy match, right? I don't care if you've got 254, 1118, or 118 and 1114 on the same alliance, right? They're still out there trying to bet every single point possible that they can, because that's what matters, right? It doesn't really matter who's on the other side of the field, other than the fact that there might be more or less cans available.
One of the things that doesn't get sort of mentioned, I wasn't around in 2001, but I've heard from people who were, that that a lot of the strategy discussion happened very, very quickly, because they would queue more than one. They would queue all the teams for 2 matches in a row together, and then basically a couple of minutes before the match began, they would tell you who was on what alliance or who was going in which match. So you only
collusion?
had no. Well, that's partly it. It's to reduce collusion and also to create basically havoc, because you had 4 teams, each of them with 4 drive team members who had 2 minutes to figure out a cohesive strategy, and thankfully that has not continued into the previous day. But I can only imagine how hard it's going to be to try to balance what your team's wants are with what is best for everybody on the alliance this year, especially. So, Ty Naveed or Mike, do you have anything you want to add about sort of like how old games come into play this year?
Mike, you had some points about 2011 you were talking earlier about.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, well.
yeah. This may be a little bit early in the game, but I really see this playing out a lot like 2011 for a number of key reasons. One, there are a limited number of scoring elements on the field, and this is more in regards to eliminations than qualifications. But everyone knew that by the time Einstein got around 2011, it was who gets the mini bot with the best Tetrix motors up the pole the fastest to hit the trigger, because everyone's going to fill up 2 rows of tubes, and we're just going to figure out who won based off the mini bot race. And it was a total arms race. 6 and 78 was a part of it. We had a pretty fast mini bot that year going up a ramp, and based off a 254's design. This year, unlike the last 3 years, we have a limited number of scoring objects again. There is definitely a points ceiling. And the thing that matters the most in making sure you get the most points is something that's going to happen in, some might say, a quarter of a second. And that's really going to be what those win-loss finals matches come down to. And when you think about it, it's what the semifinals are going to come down to too. Because you taking 2 or 4 of the containers every match versus the other 3 opponents in the semifinals of the playoffs is going to mean you're putting everyone else's scores down that much, because you know that they have great stackers, but they don't have the recycling containers to do anything with. So we identified that right away, but I don't think I realized how easy it was going to be to build something that was maybe 5 pounds or less that could get 2 containers in half a second. And you know what? We're going to see a lot of those this year. And so I really see this coming down to, at the higher levels of play and towards championships, coming down to an arms race for the containers, because I think top level alliances are going to be throwing up 5 to 6 stacks. And when it's 5 to 6 stacks with 6 containers versus 5 containers, the 5 to 6 stacks with 6 containers is definitely going to win every time, no matter what happened in autonomous. So that's the comparison I see with 2011 is we're going to see a definite arms race in that regard. And teams are already showing off. I mean, we thought we were pretty quick, and then 3310 posted their reveal video, and we're just like, oh man, all right, back to the drawing board, right? So it's definitely going to be a lot of that this season at the higher levels of play. That's where I see the 2011 comparison coming in. I wish they didn't do it this year, but they did it again. So we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, I want to add on to that one key difference that I think we'll see this year, and you brought up a good point with the weight, the 5 pounds or less. It definitely helps out in that regard. But with mini bots, it was actually a completely separate system within the rules, right? Your mini bot was inspected separately. It was weighed separately. It was powered with motors that weren't legal to use anywhere else. And kind of every team had to have a similar or some system with which to get it onto the pole. This year, teams at least are going to be constrained by previous design decisions with regards to transportation configuration, with regards to how much weight is left. I mean, a lot of teams have had weight problems. And yeah, maybe you can make a center can grabber that's at a half second in 5 pounds, but there's a lot of teams that don't have 5 pounds left. Right. So, and it's going to have to use the same power sources you have. Maybe you don't really have. I mean, I guess we have unlimited motors this year, so that's not as big of a deal. But
Yeah.
there's at least more consideration that has to go into, can I actually retrofit something onto my robot, as opposed to, well, I just go build that mini bot because that mini bot works better and it doesn't really affect the rest of my robot.
Right.
I mean, also to a certain extent, as we sort of talk about these grabbing the cans thing, I think back to 2002, when Beatty's robot basically, there was a strategy where if you got all 3 of the goals, you couldn't lose. And if mathematically there is a way this year where you can't lose in eliminations, or you will get more points than the people on the other side of the field in eliminations if you grab the 4 cans on the center. I guess sort of my question, though, is where do you guys see that being a factor as far as what level of competition? Do you think we're going to see it at eliminations of most regionals, at occasional regionals, only at the championship, only on Einstein? What do you like, Naveed? I know you're thinking about this a lot. What do you think about this?
I don't see it probably happening until a later event. I know we've got a supercharged regional down in Dallas, and there are going to be a few big name events that it's going to happen at. But I don't see it with how slow people are stacking the majority of robots. I don't see enough stacks being used where that many bins is going to make a difference. If you can steal all 4 bins, that's one thing. But if you're taking just a couple bins and they're able to take a couple bins, I don't think it's going to swing it that much until later on, honestly.
Yeah, you're going to run into it. Oh, go ahead, Mike.
I was just going to say, it's going to matter if there are 4 teams at the event that can put up 3 stacks with a container a match. It's going to matter if that's the case. If that's not the case, it doesn't really matter. Right. Even 2 that do 3 and 2 that do 2. If each alliance can put up 5 stacks a match, the containers are going to sway the match.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to find that I hope, at least 50% of the events that we see. But maybe that's not the case. I mean, Buzz is going to an event where 27 out of 40 are either first or second year teams. I don't know how that's going to play out. I'm confident that anyone in upper levels is going to be putting up 3 stacks a match. And so when you look at it that way, how many teams can put up 3 stacks a match? And if it's more than 4, then the containers will play the determining factor in the finals at those events. If that's not the case, then the containers don't matter as much. You still need to get them, but you probably don't need to get them in half a second. So. I think that's where the points breakdown kind of happens. You put up 3 stacks, and your alliance partner puts up 3 stacks. It really matters that you get them. If the event's putting up more than 2, it probably doesn't matter that you get them in the first half second. So
it matters if you score them too.
Yeah,
right? All of the previous versions of this, the action that you were doing actually got you points. Yeah. In this version, right, you have to get them in order to get the points, but it's not actually automatic. Now, by the time you get to the really high levels of play, probably pretty much guaranteed, but it's still a factor.
Yeah.
All right.
You've got your bins, you've got a mini bot.
I think that transitions really well, actually, into the next topic, acquiring game pieces, because I think this is where we're going to really see the rubber meet the road with the majority of the teams in this year's game. I can't tell you how many times I put my head in my hands and was on the verge of tears watching teams drive in a straight line at 6 totes, pick up 1, drive forward, pick up the next one, drive forward, pick up the next one. It's incredible that more teams don't think about how they're going to get the totes this year. And I think back to 2013, watching teams fumble with the human player feeder slot, or 2014, watching teams fumble getting a ball from the human player. I just wish teams went through that process more of thinking, not before you're going to stack something, how are you going to even get the thing? And I think we've seen some really creative solutions from teams getting totes from the landfill, where they're getting them 2 at a time. I love seeing those robots. Yep. But acquiring game pieces is really going to be where most of the time is taken. It doesn't take that long to drop a stack. It doesn't take that long to lift up a tote a foot, but it's going to take a lot of time to get that next tote into the proper position to keep building your stack. And then with acquiring game pieces, I think we're going to see the teams that are planning on stacking containers onto existing stacks. I think those teams are going to want to take some precious time to be consistent and not, drop the whole pile by turning just slightly the wrong direction. And that's where you have to just take every reveal video with a grain of salt, because you don't know how many times that team tried to put that container up and knock the whole thing down before they got it that time, right? Or how many times they're taking 10 seconds to do it and then they pick the one that took them 1 second for their reveal video. So acquiring game pieces, dropping game pieces, you got to think about the whole flow of events that it takes to score points. And I think acquiring totes in particular is going to be the one thing that a lot of teams have a lot of trouble with. Even getting them from the human player station, I think maybe someone else wants to talk about this, but teams are really depending on those totes landing flat or settling right onto the next tote. They like hold the first one on the ground and the second one comes down perfectly every time. I don't know how much that's going to happen, especially when you're pressured with a 2-minute, 15-second match. Naveed says
we spent so much time trying to get that to work, and it doesn't.
But you see some reveal videos that they're building a stack like that, and it looks pretty fluid. But is it going to do that every time? I don't know. So I think acquiring the game pieces this year is going to be one of the bigger challenges that teams face.
Yeah, Ty, do you want to touch on our good friend Shoot Door for a second?
Yes, Shoot Door. So,
all right. By the way, we're done with that. That's our one Shoot Door joke for the year. Okay, record it, put it on YouTube because we're done.
We're done.
Okay. First, thank you for. I'm speaking to first. Thank you for designing the Shoot Door in exactly the most difficult way possible. Right? Like, if you made that thing consistent in any way, then teams could figure it out. Like, I don't care if you dropped in totes upside down. As long as they came in upside down the same way every time, teams could figure it out. But we have a Shoot Door that depending on how level the playing field is, et cetera, can flip totes on its end, can flip totes sideways, upside down. Totes can come out crooked. Totes come out fast or slow. I don't think it's bad. I think it's good. It's a design. You need to design around it. You need to use engineering principles in order to get these totes. But I think that there's going to be a lot of teams out there that haven't realized that yet. And there's actually a few that have popped up here and there in reveal videos that the one that they built works great. Totes fall right there and just fly out on the ground. But depends on who's built it. If they go and find another one, it could come on the end every single time, like my team's does. So I think the Shoot Door, and it's a very enticing object, it's right there. They come out. You can control exactly when it comes out. But I think the teams that can capitalize on getting those consistent stacks out of the Shoot Door are really going to do a lot for themselves.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see how the teams that have sort of the pass-through tunnel of the robot, how they perform. If their tunnel has been tuned to work perfectly and easy to line up, or if it's just like for lack of a better word, a big hole in the back of their robot that totes can kind of go through. I'll be interested to see how that sort of plays together. Also on this sort of topic of how do robots do this year, Evan, do you want to talk about like the transport configuration and how people have not say exploited but utilized it?
Oh, Evan exploited it.
Sure. Yeah, I've exploited, as you can see by the spinning circle that I have transformed into.
Yeah, are you dizzy at all? Like
that's Evan's transport configuration.
Yeah, it's a little spinning in here. No, but there's this whole new way of thinking. In addition to the win-loss being gone, this whole transport configuration, and then not having anything but a height limit on the field. And some teams have chosen to use it and take advantage of it. Some teams have shied away from it. I know a lot of top teams that just said it's not worth it. We're not going to bother with that. Oh, hey, I'm back. But yeah, I know Skunkworks. We took we kind of went a little ham with the transport config. We've got parts of the robot that fold and lock into place before the match and all this crazy stuff. But it creates some challenges. There's a lot of thought that needs to go into doing the transport config and the timing of the transport config and the tools required for your transport config, and do you need a special cart? And there's some teams like 148 Robo Wranglers have really taken advantage of this with their absolute Batman crazy robot. And And 1114 has hinted that they've gone and taken advantage of it with their special cart that they posted. I think it'll be really interesting to see how this plays out, and if utilizing the transport configuration is an advantage for most of the teams that use it, or if it's really just a hindrance or just extra stuff that really wasn't necessary.
I think the real kicker there, I know it's been beaten to death, is getting it in a crate. And I know a lot of people haven't been thinking about it. I know Glenn has had to think about it a lot. He has an even smaller crate to ship to Australia, but I think that's going to be a really big issue, and we're not going to hear too much about it for another 5-6 weeks or so.
Yeah, the folks on 190 figured that out, that we either need to build a new crate or check part of our robot on the plane. So we'll figure that out.
Well, and then for those that are watching, it's important to realize that you have to do it before for those in districts, you have to do it before you go to district champs. If you're going to end up going to worlds, you have to have your bot ready to go into a crate while it's in the bag after district champs, because that you're not going to get unbag time between district champs and championships. And unless you want to put a high school kid in there with a hacksaw that's like ready to modify it on the plane, then that's something you're going to have to consider.
Right.
So with that in hand, Naveed, we've talked a little bit about the cooperation bonus. Why don't you talk a little bit about your experience and how you think people are building for it?
So I think it's pretty interesting because we didn't originally start out as planning to do the co-op stack. My team is now able to do it by happenstance, and they figured out how to do it fairly well. The big concern I have for week 1 is how many people are we going to have on the other side of the field that are going to be able to do that with us, whether it means we have to take the time to get 3 totes ready to drop off and they put one on top, or if we cap their stack. But I think it might happen in maybe 10% of the matches at a week 1 event if we're lucky. And
wow, that's awful pessimistic, but
I'm sorry.
maybe it's realistic. I don't know.
Yeah. I just want the kids to be flexible so that they know if that's not going to be something that we're going to be able to do, what are you ready to do as soon as teleop starts? What is your plan? And that's why I have like 4 or 5 different scenarios I want them running through, and I hope they're testing it right now to figure out what their backup plans are going to be, because I don't think it's going to happen as often, especially week 1.
Yeah, I think it's something that, like everything else, right? Teams had to actually design for. If you put some thought into it, you can use the same mechanism that you're using to play stacks, but you had to put that thought into it, right? It's not like cooperation in 2012 where you got a drivetrain and the top teams build something that helps the other robots get on the bridge, and you'll be okay, right? And everybody realizes that that's worth doing, so everybody goes out and just somebody gets on the ramp at the end of the match. Going and placing a cooperation, just placing the totes on the step for one. That's not even counting actually stacking them. Is a challenge that is not used anywhere else in the game. It's not part of the rest of the game. And I feel like a lot of teams, it was kind of an afterthought for them. And so I agree with Naveed. I think it's going to be pretty rare to have 2 robots on opposite sides of the field at week 1 that really are capable of making this happen. I think you're going to see a lot of teams spending the entire match trying to make this happen.
Cool. Well, I think we've gone over sort of like how we think the robots are going to look like. Let's sort of turn over toward week 1. Mike, why don't you tell us what are your we sort of hinted at all show. What are your thoughts about week 1? What's the crux of this upcoming week of competition?
Oh man, that's a big question. I mean,
I only give you the easy ones. That's you are the guest.
It's gonna be different event to event, and I think people who are kind of watching the landscape going into week 1 know that each event's gonna be unique, and it's gonna take different things to win each event, and that's how it always is. We're doing a pancake party. We're going to make pancakes for like 5 hours and watch a ton of webcasts on Saturday morning. It's going to be a blast. But I think I'm really excited to see, one, how teams work together to rank high. And I think that's going to be one of the things that's going to just take a lot of flexibility from a lot of teams to recognize the way that they actually best benefit their alliance in each given match. You can't just kind of barrel your way into doing the same thing every time. It's not like 2013 where there were enough places for the 10-point hang and there were enough places to shoot your discs in auto, and then there were enough places to go to the feeder station and take some frisbees. Like, it's definitely a different game in that regard. So I'm interested to see how teams play that out. And then I'm interested to see how eliminations play out. I'm interested to see what teams rise to the top. The fact that teams only get 2 matches to put up their highest averages. I'm used to the quarterfinals being the warm-ups, and they're not the warm-ups anymore. You got to beat at least 4 other teams in 2 matches, and there's no room for error. So that's going to be really critical too. I wish I was around in 2001 so I could see how those teams were doing. But I'm interested in seeing those couple of things during week 1.
Cool.
Yeah, 2001 was a little bit different. I don't quote me on this because I haven't actually read the rules in a few years, but I did actually read the rules at one point.
Just reads them. Goes to when he goes to
why
bed
not?
at night sometimes.
Firstaholics.com. They've got all the old rules. It's really cool. But I believe it was actually going by highest score after 2 matches.
Yeah.
So there was a grace period there in terms of you could afford to have a warm-up match, right? Because or let's say you did really well in your first match, you could just go crazy your second match and say, you know what, if we fail completely, it's okay because we still think we have these guys beat. Depending on which alliance you were, you sometimes already knew that you were going to advance anyway. So at that point, you were just practicing for your next round. That's not here anymore. Every single match in eliminations counts all from first to last.
The one thing I'm actually really interested to see for week 1 is how does this game look? In my head, this game seems kind of dull, a little bit for spectators. I think there's going to be a lot of cool robots doing interesting things, but week 1's always a little dull. But I'm really interested to see how exciting things are in eliminations. I think the finals are going to be crazy cool. I'll be really interested to see how the quarterfinals and semifinals play out, though. Well, we're reaching toward the end of the show for the night, so let's do a little bit of a new segment. We're going to go around the horn and have everybody give their shout-outs to their teams of the week. So let's start with Ty. Ty, give us your shout-outs.
All right. We got 3310 at Dallas. They've got this really cool, incredibly fast 2-container auto, and then a really cool 4 degree of freedom arm that is meant to sit at the human loading station and make stacks around it as it goes. So that could have a lot of synergy with teams that are able to pick up pre-made stacks and then deliver them. And then we've got 125 down at South Florida. They've got a nice stacking robot that's meant to be, again, from the human loading station. But the thing that's really cool about 125 is if they're going to go down in week 1, and if they don't punch their ticket at championship, they're going to get to show up and go to their district competitions with a competition already under their belts, which should give them a huge head start.
Word. All right, Evan, give it up.
Sure. So I'm really excited for the Dallas Regional. I think everybody is. I really think we're going to see some hints at high-level play, especially in eliminations. We've seen a lot of great robots revealed. One that we haven't is 987. High rollers. I'm always interested to see what they came up with.
They're going to have a turret.
No turret.
Have a turret.
I don't know. I have actually heard some rumors that they may have gone with an omnidirectional drive, and that they're very fast, but who would expect anything else? So definitely really curious to see what they came up with. But at Inland Empire, Warlords 2485, they revealed the other night, and I was really, really impressed with that robot. It's just kind of fast at everything it does, and they had one of those reveal videos that actually seemed to show, if not, it may have been the best shot, but at least a long shot that kind of showed everything. And I believe they have a 4-can auto as well, so that's going to be really crazy cool to see. Awesome. Those are my 2 shout-outs.
Naveed, you're up next. Who are your teams this week?
All right, Northwest shout-outs. First one definitely has to go to 1983, the Skunks. Aww. I'm super excited to see my sister behind the glass. Really pumped for that. And then I want to shout out down in Oregon to Shockwave 4488, and I'm really excited to see what they can do on the field. They've got kind of an interesting machine this year. It's definitely going to be the dominant one down in Oregon, and I'm excited to see also 2471 Mean Machine perhaps pairing up with Shockwave this weekend. We'll see. And I think they're probably going to be one of the best landfill bots out here on the best coast.
Well,
That's my hope.
I would say it's definitely second best coast. Over here on the East Coast, I'm thinking about 179, Children of the Swamp, and the robot the Swamp Thing. If you haven't checked it out on YouTube, we have a fun little video, but where I hadn't seen the robot and Ty tries to describe it to me. Check it out; it's really funny. But their claw is absolutely insane. That's the best way I could put it, and I really am eager to see how it performs on the field. The other one I'm going to give a shout out to is Team 195. We haven't seen much of their robot so far. They went to a week 0, but they only had a drive line. Last year, it was a swerve drive. Last year, they were really good. Probably one of the best teams in New England. I really, really want to see where they go this year, because I think if history holds true for the last 4 or 5 years, they're going to be one of the best teams in the Northeast again. All right, Mike, take us home. Tell us who you want to see this week.
Yeah, well, one, I'm just really excited to see 148. I know everyone's been talking about it. They revealed really early. I just love the way that their robot in the reveal video made my brain melt, and subsequently many of the other people on my team our jaws dropped to the floor when we watched that machine. So I'm really excited to see how they do at their first event in Dallas. I know everyone's going to be watching it, but I'll be one of those many. And then I'm going to just give a shout out to 973. I have no idea what they're bringing to the table this year, but I know with Adam and the kids on their team, they're working hard, and I know they'll have something really impressive to bring to Inland Empire. So I'm looking forward to watching their robot on the field as well.
Yes.
Those are my 2 plugs.
Awesome. If I had to guess what they're bringing to the table, it's probably sandbags. But anyway,
Oh.
no, they try hard. And
No,
they do
they're
good.
gunning for #1 seed this year. I guarantee it.
Awesome. That's good to hear. All right, well, everybody, that brings us to the close of our show tonight. If you're watching live, stick around because we're going to have a Q&A with Mike and everybody else here. Again, ask your questions through the Twitch chat with !Q on your question, and we're going to talk all about them. But we're going to go dark for just a minute or two. But before we do that, I want to send a huge thanks to Mike for showing up, coming here and having a great conversation with us. Mike, it was you've been a fabulous guest, and thank you for coming on our other show, Behind the Lines, as well, earlier in the year as well.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. You guys are the best, the ESPN of FRC, and I always enjoy being on the show. Thanks for having me.
That's 7 letters. That's pretty good. All right. So with that, I bid everybody a good evening and a good night. And if you're watching live, we'll see you in just a couple of minutes. Bye-bye now, everybody. See you.